Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carried another tray of hot meals across the busy dining hall. The military base cafeteria was always packed during lunch hour, with soldiers lining up for their daily portions. She had been working here for 3 years now, serving thousands of meals to the brave men and women who protected their country. At 28 years old, Sarah took pride in her work. She knew that good food meant everything to soldiers who spent long days training and preparing for missions. Her smile was genuine as she handed each person their plate, often remembering their preferences and asking about their families back home. The base commander, General Robert Hayes, was known throughout the facility as a fair but strict leader. He had served for over 25 years and had earned the respect of everyone under his command. Sarah had seen him only a few times, usually when he made his rounds through different areas of the base. He was tall, with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. On this particular Tuesday morning, Sarah arrived at work earlier than usual. The kitchen staff was preparing for a special lunch event, where several high-ranking officials would be visiting the base. The head chef, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been planning this menu for weeks, wanting to showcase the quality of their food service. Sarah spent extra time arranging the serving area, making sure everything looked perfect. She polished the serving spoons, organized the napkin dispensers, and even added small decorative touches to the food displays. Her co-workers noticed her attention to detail and complimented her dedication. As the morning progressed, Sarah received word that General Hayes would be dining with the visiting officials in the main hall. This was unusual, as he typically ate in his private office. The news created a buzz of excitement among the kitchen staff, and everyone worked extra hard to ensure everything would be flawless. Sarah checked her uniform one last time, smoothing down her apron and adjusting her hairnet. She wanted to represent the food service team well if she had the chance to serve the important guests. Little did she know that this ordinary Tuesday would soon become the most extraordinary day of her life. The clock showed 11:30 when the first groups of soldiers began entering the dining hall. Sarah took her position behind the main serving counter, ready to begin another day of feeding the people who served their nation. She had no idea that in just a few hours her role would change from server to protector, and her quick thinking would save the life of the base's most important leader. The familiar sounds of conversation and clinking dishes filled the air as lunch service began. Sarah smiled at each person she served, maintaining the friendly demeanor that had made her popular among the soldiers. She moved efficiently, ensuring that the food stayed hot and fresh while keeping the serving line moving smoothly. As she worked, Sarah noticed the increased security presence in the dining hall. Several military police officers were positioned at various points around the room, and she could see additional personnel stationed near the entrances. The atmosphere felt different today, charged with an energy that made everyone more alert and focused. General Hayes entered the dining hall at exactly 12:15, accompanied by 3 visiting officials in dark suits. Sarah watched from behind the counter as they made their way to a specially prepared table near the center of the room. The general's presence commanded immediate respect, and conversations throughout the hall became more subdued. Sarah continued serving the regular soldiers, but she kept glancing toward the VIP table. She felt honored to be working during such an important event and wanted everything to go perfectly. The kitchen staff had prepared special dishes for the distinguished guests, and Sarah knew that their reputation depended on delivering excellent service. The dining hall was now at full capacity, with every table occupied and the serving line extending almost to the entrance. Sarah worked steadily, her experienced hands moving quickly to keep up with the demand. She had served in busy conditions many times before, but today felt different. There was an underlying tension that she couldn't quite identify, a feeling that something significant was about to happen. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of the dining hall, casting long shadows across the crowded tables. Sarah noticed a man she had never seen before standing near the back entrance. He wore civilian clothes and seemed to be watching the room carefully, but something about his behavior struck her as odd. Unlike the other visitors or contractors who occasionally came to the base, this man kept his distance from everyone. He didn't make conversation with the soldiers nearby, and he avoided eye contact with the security personnel. Sarah tried to dismiss her concerns, telling herself that many people felt nervous in military environments. The special lunch was progressing smoothly, and General Hayes appeared to be enjoying his conversation with the visiting officials. Their table was animated with discussion, and Sarah could see that the carefully prepared meal was being well received. Mrs. Rodriguez beamed with pride as she watched from the kitchen doorway. Sarah was serving a group of young recruits when she noticed the strange man had moved closer to the center of the room. He was now only about 20 feet from the general's table, but he still maintained his distance from other people. Something about his movements made Sarah feel increasingly uncomfortable. She tried to focus on her work, but her eyes kept drifting back to the man. He kept checking his watch and looking around the room in a way that seemed calculated rather than casual. Sarah had grown up in a neighborhood where she had learned to trust her instincts about people, and every instinct was now telling her that something was wrong. The man reached into his jacket pocket and Sarah's heart began to race. She couldn't see what he was retrieving, but his movements were deliberate and focused. He was no longer just observing the room. He appeared to be preparing for something. Sarah realized that she might be the only person who had been watching him closely enough to notice these details. She looked around for the nearest security officer, but they were all positioned at the perimeter of the room, focused on monitoring the entrances and exits. None of them seemed to have noticed the man's behavior or his proximity to the general's table. Sarah felt a growing sense of urgency, but she wasn't sure what action she should take. The man took another step forward, and Sarah could see that he was now focused entirely on General Hayes. His hand was still in his jacket, and his body language had changed from nervous observation to determined purpose. Sarah realized that she might be witnessing the final moments before some kind of attack. Without fully understanding what she was doing, Sarah stepped out from behind the serving counter. Her legs felt weak, but her mind was crystal clear. She had to do something to protect the general, even if she wasn't sure exactly what that something should be. The safety of the base's most important leader might depend on her actions in the next few moments. She moved quickly but quietly, weaving between the tables filled with dining soldiers. Most people were focused on their meals and conversations, unaware of the drama unfolding nearby. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the suspicious man while trying to appear calm and purposeful in her movements. As she got closer, Sarah could see that the man had pulled something from his jacket. It was small and metallic, and he was holding it in a way that suggested it was some kind of weapon or device. Her worst fears were being confirmed, and she knew that she had only seconds to act before whatever he was planning would be set in motion. The man raised his hand, and Sarah saw her opportunity. She was now close enough to intervene, but she would have to move quickly and decisively. There would be no time for second thoughts or hesitation. The general's life hung in the balance, and Sarah was the only person in position to help him. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to transform herself from a cafeteria worker into a protector. She had no training in security or combat, but she had something equally valuable: the courage to act when others might freeze, and the determination to do whatever was necessary to keep people safe. Sarah's body moved before her mind had fully processed what she was doing. She lunged forward just as the man's hand emerged completely from his jacket, revealing what appeared to be a small explosive device. Without hesitation, she threw herself between the attacker and General Hayes, her arms spread wide to create as much of a barrier as possible. "Get down!" Sarah screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice cutting through the normal dining hall chatter like a fire alarm. The sound of her desperate warning immediately changed the atmosphere in the room, causing conversations to stop and heads to turn in her direction. General Hayes looked up in confusion just as Sarah's body collided with his chair, knocking him backward and away from the table. The visiting officials scrambled to their feet, their faces showing shock and bewilderment. In that same instant, the suspicious man realized that his plan had been discovered, and his advantage was lost. The security officers throughout the room reacted immediately to Sarah's warning. Years of training kicked in as they identified the threat and began moving toward the man with the device. But Sarah had given them something equally valuable: those crucial extra seconds that often determine the difference between success and failure in dangerous situations. Sarah and General Hayes crashed to the floor together, with Sarah using her body to shield him from whatever might happen next. She could feel his surprise and confusion, but she also sensed his immediate understanding that she was trying to protect him. His military instincts told him to trust her judgment and stay down until the situation was resolved. The man with the device looked around desperately, realizing that his careful plan had been ruined by the unexpected intervention of a cafeteria worker. Security officers were closing in from multiple directions, and he had lost the element of surprise that had been essential to his success. His window of opportunity was rapidly disappearing. Chaos erupted throughout the dining hall as soldiers and staff reacted to the unfolding emergency. Tables were overturned as people sought cover, and the organized lunch event quickly transformed into a scene of controlled pandemonium. But the security team's response was swift and professional, demonstrating the high level of training and preparedness that characterized this military facility. Within seconds, 3 officers had surrounded the attacker, their weapons drawn and their commands clear and authoritative. The man found himself with no escape route and no choice but to surrender the device. His face showed the bitter disappointment of someone whose carefully planned mission had been thwarted at the last possible moment. Sarah remained on top of General Hayes, her heart pounding so hard that she could hear it in her ears. She had never been in a situation like this before, and she wasn't sure when it would be safe to move. Her body was trembling with adrenaline, but she felt a strange sense of satisfaction knowing that she had acted decisively when action was needed. "Ma'am, you can get up now," one of the security officers said gently, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "The threat has been neutralized. You did an outstanding job." His voice carried both professional respect and personal admiration for her quick thinking and brave actions. Sarah slowly lifted herself up, offering her hand to help General Hayes to his feet. He accepted her assistance with dignity, and she could see in his eyes a mixture of gratitude, surprise, and what might have been a hint of embarrassment at being rescued by someone he had barely noticed before this moment. The dining hall was now secured, with additional security personnel arriving to assist with the investigation and cleanup. The attacker was being led away in restraints, his device safely in the hands of the bomb disposal team. Sarah watched as the professionals took control of the situation, her role in the drama apparently complete. But as she looked around the room, Sarah realized that her life had just changed forever. She was no longer just a cafeteria worker who served food to soldiers. She had become someone who had saved the life of one of the most important military leaders in the country, and that transformation would bring both opportunities and challenges she had never imagined. General Hayes stood up slowly, brushing dust from his uniform while keeping his eyes fixed on Sarah. The dining hall was now filled with security personnel conducting their investigation, but his attention remained focused on the woman who had just saved his life. He had commanded thousands of soldiers throughout his career, but he had never encountered courage quite like what he had just witnessed. "What's your name?" the general asked, his voice carrying the authority of his rank but softened by genuine gratitude. Sarah felt nervous speaking directly to such an important person, especially after everything that had just happened. Her hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, and she had to steady herself before responding. "Sarah Martinez, sir," she replied, automatically adding the respectful address that everyone used when speaking to the general. "I work in the food service department. I've been here for 3 years." She wasn't sure why she added that last detail, but somehow it seemed important to establish that she belonged on the base and wasn't just a random bystander. General Hayes nodded thoughtfully, as if filing away every detail about this remarkable woman. "Sarah Martinez," he repeated as though testing how her name sounded when spoken with proper recognition. "I want you to know that what you did today was extraordinary. You saved not just my life, but potentially the lives of everyone in this room." The security team leader approached them, carrying a preliminary report about the incident. "Sir, the device was real and armed," he said quietly to the general. "If it had been detonated in here, the casualties would have been severe. Ms. Martinez's quick action prevented a tragedy of significant proportions." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had almost happened. She had acted on instinct, driven by a simple desire to protect someone who seemed to be in danger. The idea that her split-second decision had prevented multiple deaths and injuries was almost too much to comprehend. Her legs felt weak again, and she had to sit down in a nearby chair. General Hayes noticed her distress and sat down beside her, temporarily setting aside the formalities of military protocol. "Are you all right?" he asked with genuine concern. "What you experienced today would be traumatic for anyone, regardless of the outcome. You should be proud of yourself, but you should also take time to process what happened. The other diners were being escorted from the hall while the investigation continued. But Sarah and General Hayes remained in their quiet corner. She found it surreal to be having a personal conversation with someone she had only seen from a distance before today. His presence was commanding, but she was surprised by how kind and approachable he seemed when speaking one-on-one. "How did you know?" General Hayes asked. "What made you realize that man was a threat when none of the trained security personnel noticed him?" His question wasn't accusatory. He genuinely wanted to understand how a cafeteria worker had detected danger that had escaped the attention of professional protectors. Sarah thought about her answer carefully. "He didn't belong," she finally said. "I've worked here for 3 years and I've learned to recognize the rhythms of this place. The way he moved, the way he watched people, the way he avoided eye contact with security officers. Everything about him felt wrong." "I couldn't ignore that feeling." The general nodded with understanding. "Situational awareness," he said. "It's something we try to teach all our personnel, but you seem to have a natural talent for it. You noticed details that others missed, and more importantly, you trusted your instincts enough to act on them. That combination is rare and valuable." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment at his praise. She had never thought of herself as particularly observant or brave. She had simply done what felt right in the moment, without considering the potential consequences or the recognition she might receive. The idea that her ordinary job had prepared her for something so extraordinary was both surprising and gratifying. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, suddenly wondering about the practical implications of what had occurred. Would there be investigations and interviews? Would her normal routine be disrupted? Would people treat her differently now that she had been involved in such a significant incident? General Hayes smiled for the first time since the crisis had begun. "Now," he said, "we make sure you receive the recognition you deserve. What you did today goes far beyond the call of duty for anyone, but especially for someone whose job description doesn't include protecting military personnel. You've shown the kind of character and instinct that makes exceptional soldiers." Sarah wasn't sure what he meant by that last comment, but something in his tone suggested that her future might hold more changes than she had initially imagined. 3 days after the incident, Sarah found herself sitting in General Hayes's office, a place she had never imagined visiting. The room was decorated with military honors, photographs from various deployments, and books on leadership and strategy. She felt small in the large leather chair facing his impressive wooden desk, but the general's warm demeanor helped put her at ease. "Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation in the dining hall," General Hayes began, setting aside the stack of papers he had been reviewing. "Your quick thinking and natural instincts impressed me, but more than that, they got me wondering about your potential for other roles here on the base." Sarah listened carefully, unsure where this conversation was heading. She enjoyed her work in the cafeteria and had never considered doing anything else. The routine was comfortable, the people were friendly, and she felt like she was contributing to the base's mission by keeping everyone well fed. The idea of change made her nervous. "I've reviewed your employment file," the general continued. "You have a college degree in business administration, you speak 3 languages fluently, and your supervisors consistently rate your performance as outstanding. You're clearly capable of much more than serving food, no matter how well you do that job." General Hayes leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "I want to offer you an opportunity to join my personal security detail. It would mean additional training, increased responsibility, and a significant pay increase. But more importantly, it would mean using your natural abilities to protect people who serve our country in critical roles." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The idea of working in security had never occurred to her, and she wasn't sure she was qualified for such an important responsibility. "Sir, I don't have any experience in protection or security work. I'm just someone who happened to notice something suspicious at the right moment." "That's exactly why I want you on my team," the general replied. "You have something that can't be taught in training programs. Intuition. You can read people and situations in ways that many trained professionals cannot. That skill, combined with proper training, would make you an extremely valuable asset." Sarah thought about her family and how they would react to such news. Her parents had always encouraged her to pursue stable, safe employment. Working in security for a high-ranking military official seemed like the opposite of safe. But there was something exciting about the possibility of using her abilities in a more meaningful way. What would the training involve? she asked, her curiosity overcoming her initial hesitation. She wanted to understand exactly what she would be committing to before making such a significant decision about her future. General Hayes smiled, recognizing her genuine interest. 6 months of intensive security training, including threat assessment, defensive tactics, emergency response procedures, and advanced weapons handling. You would also receive training in intelligence analysis and communication protocols. It's challenging, but I believe you have the determination to succeed. The office felt quiet as Sarah considered the magnitude of what was being offered to her. This wasn't just a job change. It was a complete transformation of her career and possibly her entire life. She would be moving from a support role to a frontline position where people's lives could depend on her decisions and actions. You don't have to decide today, General Hayes said gently. This is a big decision, and you should discuss it with your family and think carefully about whether it's the right path for you. But I want you to know that this offer comes with my complete confidence in your abilities and my personal commitment to supporting your success. Sarah appreciated his understanding approach. Many supervisors might have pressured her for an immediate answer, but General Hayes seemed to recognize that this decision required careful consideration. His respect for her thought process made her even more inclined to trust his judgment about her potential. "Can I ask you something, sir?" Sarah said, gathering courage to voice a concern that had been nagging at her. "Why me? You must have access to trained security professionals with years of experience. What makes you think I'm the right person for this position?" General Hayes stood up and walked to the window overlooking the training grounds where soldiers were conducting their daily exercises. "Experience is valuable, Sarah, but instinct is irreplaceable. What you did in that dining hall wasn't the result of training or procedure. It came from something deeper. A natural ability to sense danger and the courage to act on that sensing. Those qualities are rare, and when I find them, I don't want to waste them." He turned back to face her, his expression sincere and encouraging. "You've already proven that you can protect me when it matters most. Now I'm asking if you want to make that protection your profession." 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself reporting for her first day of security training. She had spent countless hours discussing the decision with her family, weighing the risks and benefits of such a dramatic career change. Ultimately, she realized that she couldn't ignore the opportunity to use her natural abilities in a way that could make a real difference. The training facility was intimidating, filled with equipment and obstacle courses that looked more challenging than anything Sarah had ever attempted. Her fellow trainees were mostly young soldiers with military backgrounds, and she wondered if she would be able to keep up with their physical conditioning and tactical knowledge. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, the lead instructor, gathered the new trainees for their orientation briefing. "This program is designed to prepare you for one of the most demanding jobs in the military," she announced. "You will be responsible for protecting some of our most valuable personnel, and there is no room for error in that responsibility." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she listened to the detailed explanation of what the next 6 months would entail. The physical conditioning would be intense, requiring her to develop strength and endurance she had never needed before. The tactical training would teach her to think like a protector, always scanning for threats and planning escape routes. The first few weeks were grueling. Sarah's muscles ached from exercises she had never performed, and her mind struggled to absorb the complex security protocols and threat assessment procedures. Several times she wondered if she had made a mistake by accepting General Hayes' offer. The other trainees seemed to adapt more quickly to the demanding routine, but Sarah had one advantage that gradually became apparent: her ability to read people and situations. During role-playing exercises where trainees had to identify potential threats in crowd scenarios, Sarah consistently spotted suspicious behavior that others missed. Her natural instincts, combined with formal training, were developing into sophisticated security skills. Sergeant Rodriguez noticed Sarah's unique talents during a particularly challenging exercise. "Martinez," she said after Sarah had successfully identified 3 concealed threats in a simulated public event, "you have something special. Don't let the physical challenges discourage you. Your mind is your greatest weapon, and it's already sharper than most." The encouragement came at exactly the right moment. Sarah had been considering quitting after a particularly difficult week of combat training, where she had struggled to master defensive techniques. But Sergeant Rodriguez's words reminded her why General Hayes had seen potential in her, and she committed herself to pushing through the difficulties. As the months progressed, Sarah's confidence grew along with her abilities. She learned to trust her instincts while backing them up with proper procedure and protocol. The physical training that had once seemed impossible became routine, and she found herself enjoying the challenge of mastering new skills. Her relationship with General Hayes continued to develop during brief meetings throughout her training period. He would check on her progress and offer encouragement during particularly challenging phases. Sarah appreciated his personal interest in her success, and it motivated her to work even harder to justify his confidence in her abilities. The other trainees gradually accepted Sarah as an equal member of their group. Initially, some had been skeptical about a cafeteria worker joining their ranks, but her performance during exercises and her dedication to improvement won their respect. She formed friendships that she knew would last throughout her career. During the final month of training, Sarah participated in advanced simulation exercises that tested everything she had learned. These scenarios involved protecting VIP targets in various hostile environments, requiring split-second decisions and flawless execution of security protocols. Sarah's performance was consistently rated among the best in her class. The graduation ceremony was attended by General Hayes and other high-ranking officials. As Sarah received her certification and assignment to the personal security detail, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months earlier, she had been serving food in the cafeteria. Now she was a trained security professional entrusted with protecting the base's most important leaders. General Hayes approached her after the ceremony, wearing a proud smile. "Congratulations, Agent Martinez," he said, using her new title with obvious satisfaction. "You've exceeded every expectation, and I'm honored to have you on my protection team. Your real work begins now." Sarah felt a surge of pride and determination as she realized that her transformation was complete. She was no longer the person who had thrown herself between a threat and the general in that dining hall. She was now someone who could anticipate those threats, prevent them from developing, and handle them professionally if prevention failed. The girl who had served food had become a woman who served justice. 1 year after the dining hall incident, Sarah stood in her new office reviewing security briefings for an upcoming diplomatic meeting. She wore the dark suit and earpiece that marked her as a member of General Hayes's elite protection team. But she hadn't forgotten the lessons learned during her time serving food to soldiers who served their country. Her reputation had grown throughout the military community. Other commanders requested her services for high-risk assignments, impressed by her unique combination of natural instinct and professional training. Sarah had become something of a legend among security personnel, proof that the most valuable talents could be found in the most unexpected places. The dining hall where everything had changed was still operating normally, with Mrs. Rodriguez continuing to serve excellent meals to the base personnel. Sarah visited occasionally, not just to maintain friendships but to remind herself of her roots. The staff there treated her with a mixture of pride and amazement, knowing that one of their own had achieved something extraordinary. General Hayes had been promoted to a Pentagon position, and Sarah faced a choice about whether to follow him to Washington or remain at the base where her career had begun. After much consideration, she decided to stay and establish a new program that would train other civilian personnel to recognize and respond to security threats. The program, officially called Civilian Threat Awareness Training, but nicknamed the Sarah Martinez Initiative by base personnel, attracted attention from military installations across the country. Sarah traveled frequently, teaching cafeteria workers, maintenance staff, and administrative personnel how to use their everyday observations to enhance base security. During one training session, Sarah met James, a young maintenance worker who reminded her of herself a year earlier. He was dedicated to his job but had never considered that his daily routine might prepare him for anything more significant. Sarah saw potential in his careful attention to detail and his genuine concern for the people around him. "You notice things that others miss," Sarah told him after observing his performance during a threat identification exercise. "That's not common, and it's not something that can be easily taught. Have you ever thought about security work?" The conversation felt familiar, echoing her own meeting with General Hayes in what seemed like another lifetime. James was skeptical at first, just as Sarah had been. But something in her tone and the respect she had earned convinced him to consider the possibility. Within 6 months, he had enrolled in the security training program, inspired by Sarah's example and encouraged by her mentorship. The success stories multiplied as Sarah's program expanded. Cafeteria workers, janitors, administrative assistants, and maintenance personnel discovered that their everyday jobs had prepared them with skills that could serve their country in ways they had never imagined. The military began to recognize that security was everyone's responsibility, not just the job of trained professionals. Sarah's personal life had also transformed. She had married Tom, a fellow security agent who understood the demands and rewards of their profession. They lived on the base in a small house not far from the dining hall where their story had begun. Their first child was due in the spring, and Sarah looked forward to sharing the story of how ordinary work could lead to extraordinary opportunities. General Hayes, now stationed in Washington, stayed in touch through regular phone calls and occasional visits. He took pride in Sarah's achievements, and often told colleagues about the cafeteria worker who had saved his life and then transformed herself into one of the military's most effective security professionals. On quiet evenings, Sarah would walk past the dining hall and remember that moment when instinct had overcome fear, when a simple desire to protect someone had changed the direction of her entire life. She thought about the man with the explosive device now serving a long prison sentence, and wondered if he realized that his failed attack had actually created something positive. The base was safer because of Sarah's program. Hundreds of civilian personnel had been trained to recognize threats and respond appropriately. Several potential incidents had been prevented by workers who applied the lessons Sarah taught. Proving that her initial success hadn't been just luck or coincidence, Sarah's office contained 2 items that reminded her of her journey: a framed photograph of the cafeteria staff from her last day in food service, and a commendation letter from General Hayes, praising her extraordinary courage and exceptional service. Between those 2 symbols lay the story of transformation that had changed not only her life but the lives of countless others who learned that heroes could emerge from the most ordinary circumstances. She prepared for another day of protecting those who served their country. Sarah reflected on the simple truth that had guided her journey. Sometimes the most important moment of your life arrives disguised as just another ordinary day at work.